Good morning
Good morning.
and welcome to Rotten Apples. How are you doing?
I am great. Episode 4.
I miss you.
I miss you too.
As you guys can see, we are recording from our homes, and I haven't left my apartment in like a month. So
Hashtag social distancing, right?
I know, but I'm also super privileged to be able to work from home. And I think that's something you as an educator working from home, and I think the students are virtual learning. And I know I get to work from home for the past month, which has been really interesting, but it's been very different.
Right. No, seriously. So what has work been looking like for you? How have you been doing?
It's been interesting. I get to cover a lot. Just without going into detail. I'm I'm a union organizer and representative for nurses and healthcare workers. So it's been really looking at the virus from a different standpoint because it's an impact on labor and its impact on working people and the safety of these frontline workers. And it's been, I think, in that both, I think, it's been intense, but it also has been really illuminating on these how we treat workers and these kind of systematic inequalities within our system that make it so that the access to healthcare and the people that are impacted by this virus it's skewed. It's not a virus that's blind to everybody. And I think that's
that totally makes sense.
we want to talk about that today too.
Definitely. And I guess from my end, it's looking like a lot of, virtual sessions via Zoom conferences, a lot of our online learning, group projects, things like that, a lot of meetings, always in a meeting, forever in a meeting. And then I also, I teach college classes too, and I have just finished those classes up. So that's one less thing to have to worry about. But it's pretty much the same thing that you are talking about and how this pandemic is highlighting systemic inequity within our system. But I guess we can just jump on in that.
Yeah, so I guess let's start with our students and what is in this pandemic targeting the students that you teach at Carroll City and these low-income communities.
Right. So I think that the biggest thing that's kind of targeting them, quote unquote, right now is giving students the Wi-Fi capabilities, giving them the computer capabilities, and then also the free lunches that are continuously being passed out, along with, the phone calls, the wellness check, virtual wellness checks, things like that. But is it enough? Not at all. I think that this system.
Can you go into the Wi-Fi? What were you talking about with the Wi-Fi? Can you go deeper into that?
Yeah, so the students there's a partnership of, I think it's either Xfinity or AT&T, something like that, with the district, so that the students can receive free Wi-Fi during the pandemic. It's like for a certain amount of time, but that was something that was disseminated to the kids before we left school.
Okay, that's really interesting. So providing these, I think it's also interesting that we decided to provide these resources to students now, whereas shouldn't it, if every student in 2020 needs Wi-Fi to be successful, so why is it that we're just doing it now? Like these should be initiatives.
Right. And so I feel like because this virus has really showed and pinpointed the educational inequities that we are continuously facing, even though from a larger perspective, people think that we got rid of that issue during Brown v. Board of Education. And that was definitely not the case. Just because the students are able to have school choice, depending on what district and whatnot you live in, and just because these students have the ability to get, the new and the updated books and are receiving the same curriculum, the way in which that information is disseminated to these kids is still highlighting educational inequity, specifically with the Wi-Fi network, for example. Let's say, for example, you live with your parents and they have the best Wi-Fi network, the most expensive Wi-Fi network that runs very quickly, and each person in the house has a tablet, right? Then that's one thing that is educational accessibility versus a student who might not have Wi-Fi access at all. Now the student is having to walk to the library closes at a certain hour, things like that. And so we should have, like you said before, already been having this conversation about giving access to students, because there are barriers that are in place that makes it more difficult for kids to learn depending on who they are and where they're from.
Yeah, I think that's very important. Just kind of that we should be carrying these inequities are highlighted, and we should be making sure that we're using this to push forward these initiatives past this time. And I think something that I've been really interested in reading on is that not only is this kind of impacting students or Black Miami students and students within those communities that we both worked at, or I used to work at and you worked at, is that not only is it affecting education, but it's also the impact of the broader impact of this virus has been, the burden has been unevenly put on people of color and Black people in general. And so something
Right.
we talked about before is that the people that in the Miami Herald published an article that Black Miamians are more likely to die from this virus,
Mm-hmm.
and they're more likely to be exposed. And so something that really targets is, why is that happening? And we talked about
Right.
the Be Board, and I think it's also,
Mm.
we can't talk about that without also talking about redlining and
Exactly. Yeah.
housing inequalities. Really, one, are a root cause of these educational inequities, because how many students are you're funneled to your local school even if you have these school choices, and also the inequity in housing in general, that we have low income housing more likely to have lead, or living in these areas where you're urban areas where you can be more vulnerable to pollution. And because of this,
Mm-hmm.
I have this study, I think we talked about this study before, that Black Americans and Black children are more likely to have asthma. And that
Exactly.
inequalities, they carry over. So that even if
Right.
you have asthma as a child, you're going to carry those health issues for your whole life. And that these lung issues are really something that you carry as an adult, and these inequalities. And also, who is working in the frontline work?
And it's crazy that you bring that up. Well, it's not really crazy at all, but I'm looking at this Atlantic article, right? And it was published July 20 of 2018. It's a little old, but it talks about basically how white households make 10 times the amount of money that a Black household makes, right? And then, so even if you look at the statistics, and I know we have some stats that we can pull up and we can drop in the links below, that are talking about how this impact with unemployment is specifically hitting minority communities the hardest. So let's go back to the Wi-Fi and the tablets example, right? Like, you may have internet, you may have the computer that you need to complete your work, but if your parent got laid off, who's bringing money into the household to be able to provide power? I have a computer, I have Wi-Fi, but how does it work with no power? And so that even, shows how this pandemic is revealing that we have certain basic necessities within life that um, students, if they don't have it, they can't operate, they can't be educated at all. And that's during a pandemic and outside of a pandemic as well. This monetary divide is really, really revealing itself for all Americans, honestly, not just, people of color, and not just, people of lower socioeconomic status. Everyone is feeling this in some type of way. But there's a difference between feeling it as a pinch and feeling it as a full-blown, hit. Those
Yeah.
are two completely different feelings. And I feel like our minority, our Black and our Hispanic communities are the ones that are really getting the punch instead of the tap.
And that can be, I think, there's two, I think, core issues that's the reason for, is one, generational wealth,
Exactly.
losing generational wealth, and also job discrimination and lack of STEM, even from kindergarten, like the issues with the education in our educational system, but also discrimination and in job hiring, and just these kind of barriers that prevent people of color from being successful in the workforce or achieving those high salary jobs. So with
Right.
those two components, we're setting people up for failure in these pandemics, and when we have this huge shock to our economy. And
Right.
how can we resolve that? How can we use these experiences today to create systems that make it so that this can't happen again? Or
Yeah, so it's crazy that you say that, and I really appreciate that question, because one of my friends, she actually lives in North Carolina. She's a teacher in North Carolina. And she told me that their school district is driving around with Wi-Fi buses essentially.
yeah,
And so these specific communities are having the ability to access Wi-Fi so that the students can do their work. Why is that something that we can't do all the time? Why is it that the district, I work for one of the biggest school districts in the United States, right? I don't understand why that's something that wasn't a thought, at the beginning. Districts all over the country, right? Why are we not, as a nation, thinking about how to continue to close this gap of educational opportunity, right? Wi-Fi, and I think that this pandemic is really showing that Wi-Fi is becoming a necessity. At this point, it's not a luxury anymore,
yeah.
right? Like, you can't go to work without Wi-Fi access. Sometimes, depending on what type of cell phone you have, you might need the Wi-Fi to be able to operate that device. So it's no longer saying, oh, well, this is just something that you don't need. We're just going to let you have it because, it's temporary or whatever. This is not something that's temporary, right? We're talking about this pandemic like flaring up again later on down the line.
Mm-hmm.
And if this is something that continues through August, through September, and a lot of colleges are talking about, not even going back to school in 2020, but starting back in 2021. So it's just like Wi-Fi is a necessity. We need this. And I think that that's something that the districts or in the national government can really talk about. Like, this is a conversation that needs to be had, because if students don't have access to it, then we are perpetuating disparities.
So it sounds like, just to kind of reflect what you're saying, that we need to first address the resource gaps within our communities, and how
Exactly.
even beyond having the newest textbooks in a classroom, providing resources so students at home can have the same educational opportunity.
Right. And not, and I hate to to throw this out into the universe, but I feel like we are discriminatory based off of educational levels, right? And what I mean by that specifically is, we have students, for example, that are iPrep students, right? And they receive tablets at the beginning of every single school year, and that is their tablet for the whole year. They just get the tablet because they're iPrep students. But I have other students who don't have technology at all, who might not be an iPrep kid, right? They might be one of the lowest 25%. They might be a student who is quote unquote regular, just in regular English, regular math, regular science, no advanced classes. But does that mean that that kid should not also automatically receive a tablet? And we can all say, oh, well, he can go down to the office and sign up for one if he really needs one. But we're talking about children, right? We're talking about people who are intimidated and nervous and embarrassed to wear the same shirt 2 days in a row. So when you're talking about asking them to speak up about their educational, or I'm sorry, their economic barriers that they're facing, that's not fair, and that's not realistic.
No, I agree. And I think we should be providing these resources to all students, and that the impact of this will carry forward. Is that once a student is technologically literate, has these resources to be successful, then they can bring that on to college.
That's a whole nother episode, right, within itself, talking about technological literacy and the importance of that.
Yes.
Right now in this time, we could go on, but I'm not even going to bring that up, because that was just something right there.
Also, something that I would suggest is, in order to prevent these inequities, would just be fair and livable wages, protection against these, having salaries instead of being paid hourly is a big difference. Sick leave. Why are so many people, and I'm sure it's the same for, like, we should be providing these. like basic necessities now, and we're providing them. Or even if we are, like, a lot of employers are like, oh, now you can have paid sick leave. Why aren't we providing these things? Or for the whole, like, why is this just a reaction? We should be providing these things. And I think it's important to see the changes that have been made at this time. And
that goes really with the unemployment rate too. Like, if you think about it, I mean, it's you don't even really have to think about it. I think that it's fairly simplistic to understand that if one person is making minimum wage and they have to have two jobs, once they get sick, if they're an hourly employee, then in my, like, it's not even in my opinion, it's fact, they're going to be less likely to take off of work because they need the money in order to keep the lights on. But once, you know, someone has to take off of work, it doesn't matter how many tablets or how much Wi-Fi you give me. Like I said before, if you can't plug in the device, it's useless.
exactly. And it's just like providing resources for parents so that they can be successful, and making sure that parents have that, they are paid, they can take care of themselves, and they can take care of the family. Because if you also have two jobs, it's really hard to raise a family and be successful and read to your children every night.
And now we're expecting parents to be teachers, along with be parents, along with have jobs, or, you know, be employees or employers, all in the same house on this. Like, it's, and just more specifically for my friends that are teachers that have families, and for those of you that are just teachers that have families, I don't know how you're doing it. Like, hats off to you, because you're teaching your kid and you are teaching our society at the exact same time. Like, that's difficult. Like, teaching right now for me has become more than a full-time job. It's become two jobs, because I'm working all day and I'm working at night. And so if I had a kid, I don't know how I would be able to balance that. So hats off to you guys. Like,
Yeah,
really appreciate you.
parents are doing a great job right now. They're
Right.
difficult. I think.
Right. And they're learning their kids as well. They're learning so much about them. Now you see why I called, right? Yeah. But I just want to just throw this out there too. I want to tell everyone just to look forward to some things that we're in the works of dropping later on. Like for next school year, specifically for our high school seniors, we're cooking some things up, and maybe we can explain it a little bit more on the next episode.
Yeah, I think we're just wanting to, as a duo, take the values that we've been talking about in this podcast and really try to bring change into our communities. And we talk about these inequities that are really stemmed towards socioeconomic barriers, and how the two of us can push forward and make it so that at least a couple of these barriers are not exist, or to kind of lower the.
Right. Action is activism. Always remember that. We can talk until we're blue in the face, but until we actually see things and, change or try to contribute to that change that we talk about, it's not going to happen. So got to put our money where our mouth is.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I guess this is where we leave. And I want to remind everyone to be compassionate towards yourself, and be kind to yourself, and be kind towards others at this time.
And also, if you're just at home playing 2K and not doing your work, get on top of that. Please get on top of that. Oh, and then also one more thing to our seniors, to our lovely, lovely seniors that are about to be done with high school in a few moments. We are so proud of you. We love you. Send us a message if you need anything from us so that we can help you in your educational journey. Like, we're so proud of you.
Yeah. Okay, well, see you guys later.
Stay tuned to episode 5. Episode 5 is gonna be super, super, super dope. We've already started mapping things out, so I'm excited.
Okay, talk to you guys later.
Bye. Love y'all. Bye.